Looking at how the overall technology function has evolved over the last 20, 25 odd years. And of course, I'm not saying that all the organizations are at the fourth stage. Different organizations still might be different stages. Most likely, everybody would be on stage 2, 3, or 4, or majority would be on 3 or 4. But it started with saving costs because the whole purpose of technology was to automate processes, primarily focused on some infrastructure, some communication, some computing, and all of that. Very soon in late 90s, early 2000s, it was realized that, well, that wasn't enough. Technology could do more. And we got into application development. The idea was to add more value to business processes, also have some governance, risk, and compliance. And we got into discussions about what software we should be building, what we should be buying, and so on and so forth. Late 2000s, technologies started evolving even more. And it was very clear that we could actually, the technology function could play the role of partner with business. And again, technology evolution carried out, but then different organizations also took their own trajectory of maturing through these stages where IT and business would partner together to build the strategy for IT. An IT strategy was drawn from business strategy. Governance, risk, compliance continued, but evolved, matured much more. A lot of automation came into play. Enterprise architecture became a core function within technology. And last decade or so, we are seeing as to how technology actually can drive growth. So it is not just enabling growth, but even driving growth in terms of either creating some kind of sustainable competitive advantage or creating new business models or driving some kind of an exponential growth. And we'll talk more about that in the next few minutes. As the technology function evolved, the role of CIO also has been evolving. So in the save costs scenario, the CIO was primarily focused on keeping the lights on, essentially just making sure some basic technology is available. The primary focus was on efficiency and cost savings. There was largely some kind of reactive automation. So some reports or some transactions would get automated. Essentially, the CIO role was that of supporting business in some of their processes that were kind of low-hanging fruits for automation, stuff like that. From there, as the industry and the function matures to adding value to business, the focus again changed. It was not just saving costs, but can we do other things? So instead of just creating a report, can we actually simulate various scenarios? Can we have planning and budgeting and those kinds of functions brought into the technology fold as well, and so on and so forth. One of the major important things that happened at this stage is digitizing end-to-end processes. And we'll come to examples of that as well. But the idea was that can the entire transaction, so we all use various banking applications where the end-to-end transactions have got digitized. I mean, those kinds of things started happening in the add value stage. And therefore, it brought the culture of innovation, responsive solutioning, and so on and so forth. Then comes the stage of partnering with business, where the CIO then had to kind of step even further up, how to innovate and contribute to the business's revenue stream. So can we create some kind of innovation, some kind of technologies that can actually add value to the revenue stream, not exactly bring revenue, but definitely fast track revenue generation. So examples could be, how could technology build various forecasting models where the business could then work through their customers, through the markets, and either get more customers or deepen the relationship with their existing customers. At this stage, data became very important, and data technologies evolution definitely helped get into this stage. It was kind of a synergistic evolution where the function was evolving, data technologies came in very well, and helped the CIO also to focus on data and use data as a core strength to help drive growth. And the kind of pinnacle or the ultimate stage is where the IT strategy is developed in a way that benefits the entire organization. And the focus, which was in the save costs, or to some extent even the add values kind of phases, the focus was on the bottom line, moving that to the top line as to how do we leverage technology to actually enhance the top line of the business of the company. So as the CIO went through these kind of evolutionary stages of the function and of course the evolution of the role itself, we all have seen that these are kinds of challenges that most of us would have faced. One is to what extent there is openness with business as well as other CXOs in the organization to allow technology, to empower technology to play the different roles or evolve differently, as we just discussed right now. There also has been, so I'll talk from my own experience and interacting with various friends and colleagues in the industry, that as the role was evolving in the second two stages, so basically partnering with business and driving growth or driving revenue, I have usually seen, and I've experienced myself as well firsthand, that there is initially a hesitation that, well, I am actually a technology person and now I'm actually stepping into the business area. So while there would be some degree of resistance from business potentially, but even if the business were ready, there would also be hesitation on my side, on the side of the CIO, that, well, how well can I play this role? Can I really kind of step into the shoes of being a business leader instead of just being a technology leader? The challenge that gets multiplied because of that is the challenge around business knowledge and capabilities. So quite often, historically, CIO role was entrenched into technology, and getting into business partnership and growth driver roles requires almost as much of business knowledge as business leaders. And to what extent can the CIO wear that hat, can upgrade his or her skills, again, determine that. And as I said, I mean, that personally, I have gone through some of these challenges myself, whether it was hesitation, gaining enough business knowledge and capabilities, tackling complex legacy systems. Because while the CIO wants to partner with business, wants to drive revenue growth, the CIO, of course, the first role still stays in the sense that we're not going to outsource or give away the accountabilities around managing the existing systems and technologies of the organization. And especially if you look at large or even mid-sized organization, more so in the financial, telecom, and those sectors, there are a lot of complex legacy systems that to some extent restrain or constrain both the evolution of the function as well as a CIO stepping into more of a business partner role. And how does one tackle that? Then there are, of course, very entrenched both IT and business processes. This again applies more to organizations that are relatively older in age. So people would have been doing things in a certain way for a long time. And this is not just for business processes. It applies to the technology processes as well. That this is how we build software. This is how we manage the support tickets. This is how we support business, and so on and so forth. And of course, the business processes as well. One of my favorite examples that quite often I quote in these kinds of scenarios is I worked for a bank before, a large multinational bank, which of course was in multiple countries and was also providing services all the way from retail to wholesale. And one of the processes, and there are many other processes, but I'll just take the example of one process that we had there was of mortgage. The mortgage process in the bank about 30, 35 years ago, when everything was manual, everything was on pen and paper, took about 55 different steps. So it had to go through, like, from the application till the point the loan was disbursed. to the borrower, the mortgage process had 55 odd steps. And about 8 years ago, when I was involved in that project, we were kind of doing some of the analysis and reimagining processes with our operations function. What we found is that we had about 25 different applications. We had close to 15 different touch points, human touch points in that whole process. But the number of steps was still the same 55 steps. So talk of business processes that outlive human careers, because people would have joined and left the bank, but the process outlived all of them. It still was a 55-step process. We reimagined the process in the wake of technologies available today or then, and we were able to shrink it from 55 to close to about 23 or 24 steps. In the process, eliminating a lot of human touch points, eliminating quite a few applications, and consolidating the whole thing. The end result being that we were able to complete the entire process end to end in a week's time, which earlier used to take anywhere from 2 to 6 months. So these are the kinds of things that then make the CIO and the IT function get into a partnership with business. Now, as a result, it was not only saving time and costs, it actually resulted in two major factors. One, that we were able to, with the same capacity, be able to process many more mortgages than we would have otherwise been. And more importantly, we were now able to compete very well with other competitors who were able to process mortgages much faster. So the clients that we were potentially losing out to competition were now available to engage with us because our processes were as competitive, in fact, in many cases, even better than what the competition offered. So those are, I'm sure each one of us has such examples in their kind of history and careers. But then tackling those is also one of the challenges that a CIO faces when he or she wants to graduate the function and is her role into becoming more of a business partner or a growth driver. And then, of course, the talent market. I mean, can't underline that enough today, especially with the kind of heated talent market we see. Because as the CIO steps into a business role, if I may call it, it is equally important that the CIO is able to carry their teams along with them as well. One of the examples that comes to my mind here is most of us have a lot of engineers and architects that work in our teams. And quite often, I have come across situations where, while technically these teams would be phenomenal, they know technology extremely well, the one skill that is lacking is to get into a conversation with business around the economics of technology as to what kind of costs would this have, what kind of total cost of ownership, the TCO as we call it, what kind of returns would we get from certain initiatives, and so on and so forth. Because at the end of the day, technology is for the purpose of business. And so long as we don't have our teams, especially the senior members in the technology teams, well-versed and well in having those conversations, economic conversations with business, that again becomes a challenge for the CIO and their teams to move forward to the stage 3 and stage 4. Having talked about challenges, there actually are opportunities too, in the sense that things that could come to help. And those are new technologies. So there was a time when everything had to be coded, while we now live in a world where most of the technologies are available out of the box. So talk of IoT, talk of AI, talk of cloud devices. I mean, everything is so well networked, so well connected, so mature. And this could be leveraged to the advantage of the CIO in meeting some of the challenges we talked previously. Process digitization in most of the organizations is an advanced stage. So it is no more a debate. It is more of timing. It is more of prioritizing things than debating as to should we digitize a process or not. So that again comes to help. Harnessing data. We talked about that as to how we can leverage data and data technologies to again enable business value and drive growth. So again, comes to the advantage of the IT function, the CIO. On the talent side, mentoring of talent is now quite common. And how can talent be mentored and groomed and matured? On the processes side, more so start at home, when charity begins at home, as they say. So how, and of course, we now have processes in the last 15, 20 years, agile, DevOps, and all of those kinds of things. Plus, on the architectural side, we have microservices that have come in, which results into much higher flexibility and agility in IT processes. Getting business understanding, and again, now getting business understanding has become relatively easier compared to past, when one had to have classroom sessions, because there are a lot of different channels available for gaining business knowledge. And because of collaboration tools, because of the fact that quite often the industry itself operates like an ecosystem, there are opportunities of impacting not just one's own organization, but also the ecosystem. And time permitting, I can definitely share some of the things we're doing at Berkadia, or things that I did at HSBC, which essentially was not, the benefits of that was not limited to the organization, but also spread beyond the company into the ecosystem. So having talked about challenges and opportunities, let me just share a few, and this is not the end of it. This is not the finite models that one can talk about, but what kind of revenue enabling models can one look at? So I will mention about 4 here, but there could be other models as well. So as I said, this is not a finite comprehensive list. And in fact, I would be definitely open to hear ideas from all of you in terms of any other different models that you would have adopted in your organizations. So first is innovation through technology. This is the kind of model that we are pretty much well versed with. I would draw the parallels here of where we leverage technology to say digitize processes, which either results into end-to-end transaction automation or much superior customer experience, and so on and so forth, or sometimes even the delivery models of products and or services can change based on the technology implemented. Two very common examples that come to mind are banking and retail. There was a time when we used to visit a physical place to do banking and to do any retail shopping. And I doubt if any one of us does all of our banking and all of our retail shopping only physically nowadays. In fact, most of us do most of that through technology, which is where technology has made a big difference in terms of the way the service gets delivered to the customers, end users, that is us. The other model is coming up with newer business models or newer products or services while still staying in the same business area. An example that comes to mind is telecom, for instance, where 20 years ago, the technologies available then enabled the telecom business to have voice as their primary revenue stream. And as more and more fiber got laid on the planet, there was a gradual shift in the model from voice to data. So a complete change in business model, a complete change in the way the service is provided. And in fact, now it has gone to the extent where voice itself also is seen as data. So essentially, the telecom companies are more of data pipes than anything else. That's where technology has enabled them to change their business model, offer different services, and so on and so forth. The other model for revenue enabling could be, and in all of these models, a CIO plays a pivotal role because it is a CIO who brings in the technology, their vision as to how technology can either change the experience or change the business model, or there could be IP monetization. So there could be software technologies developed, evolved within an organization that could be monetized. One of the examples that comes to my mind is way back in 2004, 2005 timeframe. Microsoft was exploring, and the CIO at Microsoft then was exploring the possibility of managed IT services. The idea came from the fact that Microsoft, being a large multinational with a huge infrastructure network across multiple countries, was managing this whole IT function, or most of the infrastructure, for itself. And many of Microsoft's customers were struggling to manage their own infrastructure within the organization. And the question was that, can we can the organization monetize some of the tools, processes, technologies that it had evolved to then provide those services to customers externally? The experiments were very successful, though, of course, that was not the business Microsoft got into, which we all know. But managed IT services eventually has now become a very matured industry, and there are a lot of companies offering those services. So these kinds of monetizations are possible. And similarly, there could be IP as well. There could be specific products developed within the organization that could be available to more companies outside the organization. The last one, which is relatively kind of sounding simple, but also has its own complexities, is technology investments, which is investing in or acquiring a stake in, or sometimes acquiring technology startups. Now, when we acquire technology startups, if they are at a very early stage, they probably won't have a revenue stream. But if they are at an advanced stage, they would have their own revenue stream, which gets added to the P&L of the organization. At the same time, they bring in a dual advantage of providing technology to the organization as well. So if Berkadia were to acquire a technology firm, we would, and actually we have acquired a couple of firms in past, we get a technology advantage, and in one of them, we actually have got the revenue stream advantage as well.